Chapter 2. Elizabeth, Chicago, 1884. Elizabeth Parker shivered as the chilly outside air bit through her light fabric. The weather had seemed brighter this morning when she'd left the house to check on her father, but now angry clouds darkened the sky and the temperature had dropped considerably, enough that she wished she had a coat, even though she wouldn't be outside long. Just long enough to run to the general store to look at the new shipment of fabric. She couldn't buy any, of course. There was no money for that. But she could look, and she could dream. One day she hoped to open a dress shop, even though she knew it was a lofty dream. Not only did most women sew their own clothing, but very few owned businesses. Still, times were changing, and it wasn't impossible. She'd heard rumors that a woman had opened a similar shop in Boston. None of that mattered, though, if her father didn't get better. A raindrop pelted her face and Elizabeth quickened her steps, but she wasn't fast enough. Moments later, the skies opened and rain poured down. By the time she reached the general store, she was soaked to the bone. Margaret, the store owner's wife, glanced up as she entered, and concern etched itself in every line of her face.
"Elizabeth, are you okay?"
"Fine." Elizabeth brushed her shoulders in an effort to remove the water, but it was useless. The two had merged into one cold and heavy conglomeration. Just didn't expect it to rain today.
"It's raining?"
Margaret stepped closer to the window and shook her head.
"Normally, my ankle tells me when rain is coming, but I didn't feel anything today."
Elizabeth wasn't sure of Margaret's exact age, but her dark hair held only a few strands of gray, and her face only the slightest trace of fine lines that seemed much more prominent with age. So Elizabeth doubted she was that much older. Still, she claimed that her ankle, which she'd broken when she was young, could predict the weather. Evidently, it ached more when rain was coming, and for the most part, Margaret was correct.
"It seemed to come out of nowhere today,"
Elizabeth agreed, as she made her way over to the fabrics.
"I hope that doesn't mean we're in for a short summer."
Margaret sighed and joined her at the fabric display.
"Me too. I just ordered some new lighter fabrics. I'd hate for them not to be bought."
"Oh, I wish I could get them when they come in. I could use a new summer dress." Elizabeth allowed herself to dream as she ran her fingers over a pretty checkered fabric. This one would be lovely for picnics and church outings, and could be elevated with a lace collar and a touch of lace on the sleeves.
"Well, if you promise not to tell Brian."
Margaret looked around conspiratorially for her husband, who owned the store.
"I might be able to trade some fabric in exchange for a dress. I can sew, but I rarely have time, and yours always looks so much better than mine."
Elizabeth smiled at her friend.
"Your dresses are lovely, Margaret, but if you're serious, I will take you up on that offer. With Pa being sick, it might be the only way I can afford it."
Margaret's smile faltered.
"I'm so sorry to hear about your father. I sure hope he recovers."
"Thank you. Me too, but I'm trying not to focus on it right now, which is why I'm here looking at your beautiful fabric." "Tell me about this one," Elizabeth said, hoping to change the subject and lighten the mood. Margaret's smile returned as she talked about the lovely silk fabric that Elizabeth held. Silk was too expensive to make an entire dress out of, but Elizabeth loved to use it as an accessory piece when she could. The women talked a little longer, sharing ideas for dresses and recipes, until a harried voice grabbed Elizabeth's attention.
"Miss Parker!"
The two women turned toward the door, and when Elizabeth saw who it was, her heart sank. She'd left instructions for the nurse to come and retrieve her if her father's condition worsened, so her appearance meant nothing good.
"It's your father, Miss Parker. I think you'll want to come back."
Elizabeth nodded and let her hand fall from the fabric. It was silly to dream anyway. With her mother gone and her father's health waning, there would be no way she'd ever be able to buy new fabric, much less start a dressmaking business. Not unless she married a wealthy man, and with her independent streak, that seemed highly unlikely.
I'm sorry, Margaret. I have to go.
Margaret shook her head.
Of course. I hope everything is all right.
It wasn't, but Elizabeth merely flashed a small smile and then followed the nurse back out into the rain. It was coming down harder now, and the clouds had taken on a dark, menacing appearance, one that sent chills through Elizabeth's spine. The nurse entered the clinic first, but Elizabeth was right on her heels and rushed to her father's side. She gripped his hand and startled at how much worse he looked. It had barely been an hour, if that, but all the color was gone from his complexion. His hand was cold, and though she had long wished she could heal him, holding his hand now felt cold and clammy, as if life had already left it. He'd been fighting the illness for weeks, and she had known that the end was near, but he was all she had left, and she had no idea what she would do when he was gone.
Pa, please don't die on me. I don't know what I'm going to do without you.
She picked up a nearby towel with her free hand and wiped the beads of sweat from his forehead. His eyes flicked open, but only briefly.
I took care of that,
he said, his voice raspy, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. A cold sensation gripped her heart.
Took care of it? How? What do you mean?
Jacob Canfield will watch after you.
Jacob Canfield, the owner of the saloon. She did not know the man well, but her father had befriended him in the last several years. After her mother's death, the saloon had become a safe haven for her father, a place for him to drink away his sorrow and wallow in his pity. She had never approved, but while she'd voiced her opposition and prayed continually about it, it had not been enough to dissuade him from the frequent visits. However, she had not known her father was close enough with the sleazy other man to ask him to look out for her when he passed.
You cannot leave me with Jacob Canfield.
He's a good man,
her father wheezed, each word halting and labored. Elizabeth had her doubts about that, but she decided to try a different line of reasoning.
But he owns a saloon. What if he asks me to work there? You would not want that for me, would you, Pa?
With the little strength he had, her father shook his head.
He won't. We have worked out an agreement. He is only to watch after you.
Elizabeth had no doubt Jacob had promised her father that, but she also had little doubt that he would follow that promise. Granted, she was making assumptions, but every fiber in her body told her he could not be trusted. However, her father was dying, and she would not fill his final moments with arguments. She would find a way to take care of herself and trust that God would provide for her.
Okay, Pa, I will trust you, but please fight. If you fight a little more, you can beat this. I know you can.
The deathly pallor emanating from him told her the exact opposite, but the words made her feel better, and she hoped they would bring relief to her father as well.
I am too tired to keep fighting, but I will be with Jesus soon. I hate that I am leaving you here, but I do not want you to worry about me. I will be fine.
Tears blurred her vision as she squeezed his hand a little tighter.
I know you will, Pa, and you will get to see Ma and Abigail again.
Her mother had died years before during childbirth with her little sister, Abigail, who never got to take her first breath in this world before she was whisked away to heaven.
Yes, I can almost see them now.
Her father's voice was weaker, almost distant, as if he really was almost at heaven's door and no longer in the room with her.
It is beautiful.
For a moment, a smile lit up his face, and Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that maybe God was healing him and would send him back. But then the smile froze. There was a final rugged breath, and then her father was still.
No, Pa!
Even though she knew it was useless, she shook him, hoping to bring him back, to flood life into his veins once again, but it was not to be. He remained still, the smile etched onto his face and his eyes focused on something far away.
"He's gone, my dear. I'm sorry."
The nurse, who had been watching from the corner of the room to give them privacy, stepped forward and closed her father's eyes with her hand.
"There is nothing more we can do."
Elizabeth sniffed and dabbed at her eyes. Every bone in her body longed to crumple into the corner and remain there until she too passed away. But she knew that she could not do that. She would have to be stronger now. She would have to find a way to take care of herself, and she would need God now more than ever. Her faith had been shaken over the last few years, but her mother's voice, reminding her that God loved her and was always in control, even when it seemed darkest, kept her devotion from wavering.
"Do you have someone to take you home?"
the doctor asked, stepping into the room. He was an older gentleman with graying hair and weathered features, but he had been nothing but gentle with her, and his kindness reverberated in his voice. Home. Did she even know where that was now? Did she go back to the house she had shared with her father? It was all she knew, but she was also aware that she did not have money to keep making the payments. How long would the bank allow her to remain before they came and took it all away? She would have to find a job, some way to earn enough money to remain in the house, or find a smaller place that she could afford. "I will be fine," she said, pulling back her shoulders. "My house isn't far," although she had no intention of going straight there. A stop in every available store that might afford employment would happen first. The doctor nodded and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a fatherly gesture and did not give her discomfort.
"I will make sure the body is taken care of and have the minister reach out to you about funeral arrangements."
Elizabeth nodded. She had not even thought about a funeral, but she supposed it would be necessary. "Thank you." She stepped out of the doctor's office and into the bright sunlight, blinking against the blinding light. It had been pouring only moments ago when she'd returned to the clinic, and now it was sunny? It was like a bad joke, and she felt a glimmer of anger spark in her chest. How could it be so cheery outside when she felt like she was dying inside? How could God send sunshine when her entire world had just fallen apart?
"Is he gone, then?"
Elizabeth turned to the voice, jumping back at the sight of Jacob Canfield leaning against the column. Bile burned the back of her throat at the mere sight of him, and her anger grew, but this time it was at the man in front of her and not God. "What are you doing here?" His lips pulled into a shape that she suspected was meant to be a smile, but looked more like a lion about to devour prey.
"I'm here to pay my respects, of course."
His respects? That was rich. She doubted he had respect for anything. "I'm afraid you're too late then." He chuckled, a low, mirthless sound that sent shivers running down Elizabeth's spine.
"No, I'm right on time. Paying my respects was only part of the reason I came. The other reason is to collect my property."
"Property? What property?"
"You."
He was a large man. His shirt and jacket strained at the buttons, and his face was thick and fleshy. But it was his eyes that filled her with dread. They were cold, dark, and intimidating. She would not let him know he intimidated her, though. Elizabeth threw her shoulders back, standing as straight as she could manage. "I am not property and will be going nowhere with you. My father may have made an agreement with you to watch out for me, but I was not consulted." Jacob pushed off the column, an expression of anger darkening his features.
"You didn't need to be consulted. It was a business transaction between men, and not a woman's affair."
The anger within her grew. She knew that many men thought like Jacob did, that women were too dumb to understand business, but this was even worse. He believed she was property to be owned, and she was having a hard time seeing him as a fellow creation. "I am not a business transaction. My father may not have realized, but I am capable of taking care of myself, and that is what I will be doing." She turned to head in the opposite direction, but Jacob caught up to her and pulled on her arm, forcing her to turn back to him.
You will come with me because that was the deal.
She tried to shake his hand from her arm, but it was no use. He was stronger than she was, and his fingers dug into her arm through the fabric of her dress like talons. She had no doubt there would be bruises there tomorrow. No, the deal my father told me was that you watch out for me, nothing more. Now, please remove your hand from my arm. Noticing the nearby people in the street, Elizabeth raised her voice to draw attention to the situation. Dark clouds formed in Jacob's eyes, but after glancing at the crowd stopping to stare, he dropped her arm. His voice was loud enough for her only to hear as he whispered, You will be mine, and there is nothing you can do about it. I'll see you later. Then he flashed a malicious smile at her and left. Elizabeth leaned against the wall of the clinic and breathed. Lord, thank you for the protection, but I'm going to need help here, she whispered. She had bought herself a little time, but she was afraid that Jacob might turn out to be right. If she couldn't find a way to support herself, there would be little else she could do. Women had few options in society, especially if they were unmarried and without family, but she would not go down without a fight. When she was sure that Jacob was gone and would not be returning, she made her way back to the general store. She knew Margaret wasn't hiring, but she carried the newspaper there, and she hoped it might give her options for employment.